The recycling station on Kepler 442b hummed with the constant drone of machinery processing waste from a dozen different species. Dr. Sarah Chun wiped sweat from her forehead as she finished treating a Zephyrian dock worker's radiation burns. The makeshift medical bay she'd established in the abandoned storage unit wasn't much, but it served the forgotten souls who couldn't afford proper health care in the core systems. Sarah had been running her underground clinic for 3 months now, ever since she'd been blacklisted from the Galactic Medical Council for refusing to follow their species' priority protocols. Humans, being one of the newer members of the galactic community, ranked fairly low on the treatment hierarchy. Sarah had made enemies when she treated a dying Korthak child before a wounded Etherian diplomat. The child lived, but her medical license was revoked faster than light could travel between star systems. The afternoon shift was winding down when Jorik, a massive Bruton cargo handler, burst through her clinic doors. His 4 arms were cradling something wrapped in a torn tarp, and his usually stoic expression showed genuine distress. "Doc Chun," he rumbled in his deep voice, "you need to see this." Sarah looked up from organizing her limited medical supplies. "What is it, Jorik?" "Found in the waste containers from the Vex-High ship," he said, carefully unwrapping the bundle. They were throwing it away with the garbage. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Inside the tarp was a creature unlike anything she'd seen in her xenobiology textbooks. It was roughly the size of a large house cat, but with crystalline fur that seemed to shift colors in the dim light. 6 legs ended in delicate paws, and its elongated face held large, luminous eyes that were currently closed in obvious pain. Most striking were the wing-like appendages folded against its sides, transparent, and gossamer thin like insect wings, but clearly more sophisticated. "By the stars," Sarah whispered, moving closer. "What is it?" "Don't know exactly," Jorik admitted. "But look at this." He pointed to a small collar around the creature's neck, made of some iridescent metal with Vex-High script etched into it. "That's expensive work." This wasn't just some wild animal they picked up. Sarah knelt beside the creature, her medical training taking over despite her amazement. The being was clearly suffering. Its breathing was labored, and she could see small, worm-like parasites moving under its translucent skin. The parasites glowed with a sickly green light, and wherever they traveled, the creature's beautiful crystalline fur turned dull and gray. "How long ago did the Vex-High ship leave?" she asked. "About 6 hours," Jorik replied. "They dumped their waste and took off without even following proper disposal protocols. Typical Vex-High arrogance." Sarah carefully examined the creature without touching it. The Vex-High were one of the oldest and most technologically advanced species in the galaxy. They were known for their cold logic and complete disregard for what they considered lesser life forms. If they'd abandoned this creature, it meant they'd given up on it entirely. "These parasites," Sarah murmured, pulling up her diagnostic scanner. "I've never seen anything like them. They're not just feeding on the host, they're actually converting the host's cellular structure into something else." The scanner's readings made her frown. The parasites weren't just random infections. They showed signs of artificial enhancement. Someone had engineered these things. "Can you help it?" Jorik asked quietly. The big Bruton had a soft spot for animals, which most people found surprising given his intimidating appearance. Sarah stood up, her mind racing. "I don't know. I need to understand what species this is first, and then figure out how these parasites work. Without proper xenobiological databases or advanced medical equipment." She trailed off as the creature's eyes suddenly opened. They were the most beautiful thing Sarah had ever seen, like looking into twin galaxies, swirling with stars and nebulae. The creature looked directly at her, and she felt an odd sensation, as if something was gently touching her mind. "Help, please." Sarah staggered backward. "Did you hear that?" Jorik looked confused. "Hear what?" The voice had been in her head, barely a whisper, but unmistakably real. The creature was telepathic. "Dying cubs need mother." "Cubs?" Sarah whispered. "You have babies?" The creature's eyes grew brighter, and suddenly, Sarah's mind was flooded with images. She saw the creature, clearly female, living in a beautiful crystalline cave with 3 smaller versions of herself. The cubs were playing, their wings catching light like prisms. Then came darker images. Vex-High scientists in sterile laboratories, the mother creature restrained while they ran experiments, the deliberate introduction of the parasites to test adaptive responses. They made weapon to kill my people. Sarah felt sick. The Vexi had created biological weapons disguised as parasites, and were using this innocent creature as a test subject. When she'd proven resistant to their torture, but, finally, succumbed to the modified parasites, they'd simply disposed of her like garbage. Those bastards, Sarah muttered. They were testing biological weapons. Jorik's expression darkened. Not surprised. The Vexi think they're gods among the stars. What are you going to do? Sarah looked down at the dying creature, her mind made up. I'm going to save her. And then I'm going to make sure the galaxy knows what the Vexi have been doing. Her? Jorik asked. Yes, her. Her name is... Sarah paused as the creature shared the concept with her. It wasn't really a name as humans understood it, but rather a feeling of starlight dancing on crystal snow. I'll call her Stella. Thank you, came the whisper in her mind. Sarah began pulling together her medical equipment. Jorik, I need you to find me everything you can about Vexi biological research. Check the black market data brokers, call in favors. I don't care what it takes. What about you? I'm going to do what I do best, Sarah said, loading a sedative into her injector. I'm going to practice medicine without a license and probably start an interstellar incident. She carefully administered the sedative to Stella, watching as the creature's breathing became easier. Don't worry, girl. I know what it's like to be thrown away by people who think they're better than you. But humans have a saying, we don't leave anyone behind. As Stella drifted into medicated sleep, Sarah began setting up her equipment. She had no idea how to treat crystalline-based life forms infected with engineered parasites, but she'd figure it out. She always did. Outside, the recycling station continued its endless work, processing the waste of a dozen civilizations. But in her small clinic, Dr. Sarah Chun prepared to fight for the life of a creature that had been literally thrown away by one of the galaxy's most advanced species. The first step was understanding Stella's biology. Sarah spent the next 4 hours taking careful scans and samples, being extra cautious not to stress her patient further. What she discovered amazed her. Stella's people weren't just beautiful. They were incredibly sophisticated. Their crystalline structure could conduct and store energy like living batteries, and their wing membranes could apparently manipulate electromagnetic fields for flight. But the parasites were systematically destroying all of this. They were converting Stella's crystal matrix into a silicon-carbon hybrid that couldn't maintain its unique properties. Worse, they were reproducing exponentially. At this rate, she has maybe 18 hours, Sarah muttered to herself, reviewing the scan results. That's when Jorik returned with news that changed everything. Found someone who might help, he said, bringing in a hooded figure. Doc Chun, meet Kess. The figure lowered her hood, revealing the scaled features of a Nayari trader. Her species were known as information brokers and black market dealers operating in the gray areas between legal and illegal commerce. Dr. Chun, Kess said in accented standard. Jorik tells me you're trying to treat a Luxian dreamweaver. Oh, what now? That's what your patient is, Kess explained, looking at Stella with something approaching reverence. Luxian dreamweavers are one of the rarest species in the galaxy. They're empathic telepaths who can literally weave dreams and manipulate consciousness. Most people think they're myths. Sarah's blood ran cold. How rare are we talking? There might be a few hundred left in the entire galaxy, Kess replied. They're so valuable that owning one is illegal under galactic preservation laws. If the Vexi had one for experimentation, they were committing a capital crime, Sarah finished. That's why they threw her away when their experiments went wrong. Kess nodded grimly. And if word gets out that a human is treating an illegally obtained dreamweaver, every faction in the galaxy will come looking for her. Some to rescue her, others to claim her for themselves. Sarah looked down at Stella's peaceful face. The sedatives were keeping her comfortable, but the parasites were still spreading. In her mind, she could feel faint echoes of the creature's dreams, images of crystal caverns, and flying through nebulae, hunting among the stars with her cubs. I don't care, Sarah said finally. She asked for my help. That makes her my patient. Kess smiled, showing pointed teeth. I was hoping you'd say that, because I have information about those parasites that might save her life. What kind of information? The Vexi didn't create them, Kess revealed. They stole the design from an abandoned research station in a void sector. The original creators built in a kill switch. Sarah's heart raced. A kill switch? You mean we can stop them? If we can get to the research station and retrieve the control codes, Kess confirmed. But the station is in Wraith space now. No one goes there and comes back. Sarah looked at her patient, then at Jorik, then back at Kess. How long would it take to get there? 12 hours, if we push a fast ship to its limits, Kess replied. Stella might not have 12 hours, Sarah said. Then, we better get moving, Jorik rumbled, standing up. I know a ship we can borrow. Sarah stared at them both. You're willing to fly into Wraith space for a creature you barely know? She's not just any creature, Kess said seriously. Dreamweavers can heal psychological trauma with a touch. They can bring peace to the tortured minds of war veterans, ease the passing of the dying, even cure certain forms of mental illness. In the old days, they were revered as living angels. And, Jorik added with a grin, I've always wanted to punch a wraith in the face. Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes. After months of being treated as an outcast, here were two aliens willing to risk their lives to help her save another alien they'd never met before. All right, she said, beginning to pack her medical supplies. Let's go steal some control codes and save a Dreamweaver. As they carefully moved Stella to a portable medical pod, Sarah couldn't help but smile. The Vexi had thrown away what they considered broken and worthless, but Sarah had learned something in her years of practicing medicine. There was no such thing as worthless life. Every being deserved a chance to survive, to heal, to find their way home. And Dr. Sarah Chun was about to prove that humans didn't just believe in second chances. They'd fly into hell itself to make sure everyone got one. The ship Jorik had borrowed was a modified Kytherian courier vessel called the Whisper. It wasn't much to look at, scarred hull plates, mismatched engine pods, and a cargo bay that smelled like exotic spices and questionable decisions. But, according to Kess, it was one of the fastest ships in this sector when properly motivated. Sarah had set up a temporary medical bay in the ship's small passenger compartment, with Stella's pod connected to every monitoring device she could scrounge together. The Dreamweaver's condition had stabilized somewhat during transport, but the parasites were still spreading. Sarah estimated they had maybe 10 hours before irreversible damage occurred. Never thought I'd be flying into Wraith space for a veterinary emergency, muttered Zara, the ship's pilot. She was a lean woman with cybernetic implants covering half her skull, and the kind of attitude that suggested she'd survive things that would break most people. She's not an animal, Sarah corrected, checking Stella's vital signs. Dreamweavers are highly intelligent, more so than most species we consider civilized. Yeah, well, intelligent or not, she's going to be very dead if those Wraith ships find us, Zara replied, adjusting their course. We're entering the Void Sector now. Everyone might want to say their prayers to whatever gods they believe in. The Void Sector had earned its name honestly. It was a region of space where several ancient civilizations had died out, leaving behind only ruins and automated defense systems that shot first and never bothered with questions. The Wraiths were one of the few species crazy enough to claim territory there, and they'd earned their reputation by being even more aggressive than the ancient killing machines. Tell me about this research station, Sarah said to Kess as they watched the stars change from normal points of light to the eerie, shifting patterns typical of the Void Sector. It's called Station Prometheus, Kess replied, pulling up a holographic display. Built by a species called the Architects about 3,000 years ago. They were obsessed with biological perfection and created all kinds of terrible things before they mysteriously vanished. The station looked like a massive flower made of metal and crystal, with 7 petals extending from a central hub. Each petal was the size of a small city, and the whole structure rotated slowly in the void. The Vexi found about 50 years ago, Kess continued. They've been quietly stealing research data ever since, but they're too afraid to actually occupy it. The station's AI is still active, and it doesn't like visitors. What about the Wraiths? Jorik asked. He was sitting near Stella's pod, his 4 arms crossed in a way that looked surprisingly gentle for someone his size. They use it as a base sometimes, but they don't stay long. Something about the place drives them crazy after a while. Even crazier than usual, I mean. Sarah frowned. What kind of research was being done there? Biological weapons, mostly. The Architects were trying to create the perfect predator, something that could hunt and kill any species in the galaxy. They succeeded too well. Their creations turned on them. A chill ran down Sarah's spine, and the parasites infecting Stella came from that place. According to my sources, yes. The Vexi found the parasite design in the station's biological warfare archives. They thought they could improve on it. Improve how? Make it species-specific. The original parasites would kill anything they infected. The Vex-High wanted to create targeted weapons that would only affect certain races. Sarah looked down at Stella, feeling sick. The beautiful creature had been used as a test subject for genocide weapons. And they tested it on Dreamweavers because Dreamweavers have the most complex nervous systems in known space. Kess finished. If the parasites could adapt to infect them, they could infect anyone. Contact on sensors, Zara announced from the pilot's seat. 3 ships, configuration unknown. They're not broadcasting any identification signals. Wraiths? Jork asked, standing up. Has to be. Everyone else is smart enough to stay out of this region. Sarah watched the tactical display as 3 angular ships approached. Wraith vessels were distinctive, all sharp edges and aggressive lines, built for intimidation as much as function. They looked like someone had taken the concept of Predator and translated it into starship design. They're hailing us, Zara reported. Put them through. The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of the lead Wraith ship. The captain was typical of his species, tall, pale, with elongated features and completely black eyes. Wraiths had evolved as apex predators on a world of eternal twilight, and everything about them screamed dangerous. Unknown vessel. The Wraith captain spoke in heavily accented standard. You are in claimed territory. State your business or be destroyed. Sarah stepped forward before anyone could stop her. This is Dr. Sarah Chun aboard the courier vessel Whisper. We're on a medical emergency mission to Station Prometheus. The Wraith captain's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his black eyes. Medical emergency? Explain. Sarah made a quick decision. We're carrying a dying Luxian Dreamweaver. She's been infected with artificial parasites created from research stolen from your station. We need access to the original control codes to save her life. For a moment, the bridge was silent. Then, the Wraith captain did something completely unexpected. He laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound that made everyone on the Whisper uncomfortable. A human doctor wants to risk her life to save a Dreamweaver, he asked. This is either the most elaborate lie I've ever heard, or the most interesting thing to happen in this sector in decades. It's the truth, Sarah said simply. The captain studied her through the screen. Prove it. Sarah gestured for Jork to move Stella's pod into view of the communication array. Even unconscious and ravaged by parasites, the Dreamweaver was clearly something extraordinary. The Wraith captain's demeanor changed completely. He leaned forward, his predator's instincts clearly recognizing something significant. By the dark void, he whispered, That's actually a Dreamweaver. I haven't seen one in over a century. You know what she is? Know what she is? The captain laughed again, but this time there was genuine amusement in it. Dr. Chun, my grandmother was saved by a Dreamweaver during the Plague Wars. Our entire clan owes a life debt to their species. Sarah felt hope stirring. Then you'll help us? Help you? Doctor, we're going to escort you to that station and make sure nothing interferes with your mission. He turned to someone off screen and barked orders in the Wraith language. My name is Commander Vex, and it would be my honor to assist in saving a Dreamweaver's life. 20 minutes later, the Whisper was flying in formation with 3 Wraith warships toward Station Prometheus. Sarah had never thought she'd be grateful for an escort of alien predators, but the universe had a way of surprising her. Station coming into visual range, Zara announced. Sarah looked at the main screen and felt her breath catch. Station Prometheus was even more impressive in person, a massive structure that seemed to pulse with its own internal light. The metal petals were covered in intricate patterns that shifted and moved like living things. It's beautiful, she whispered. It's also scanning us, Zara added. High-intensity sensor sweeps. Whatever's running that place knows we're here. Commander Vex's voice came over the communication channel. Dr. Chun, the station's AI is notoriously hostile to visitors. My ships will hold position here while you dock. If you run into trouble, we'll handle it, Sarah replied with more confidence than she felt. As the Whisper approached the central docking bay, Sarah felt Stella stirring in her pod. The Dreamweaver's eyes opened, and suddenly Sarah's mind was filled with images and sensations. Home. This place, remember, Stella? What do you mean, remember? Long ago, my people came here. Sarah realized what Stella was trying to tell her. The Dreamweavers visited this station before, when it was still active. Try to help. Architects going mad, failed to save them. The docking bay opened like a flower, revealing a cavernous space lined with strange machinery. As soon as the Whisper touched down, lights began activating throughout the bay in sequence, as if the station was waking up. "That's not ominous at all," Kess muttered. Sarah began preparing Stella's portable life support system. "Jorik, I need you to carry your pod." "Kess, you're our guide." "Zara, I'm staying with the ship," the pilot said firmly. "Someone needs to be ready for a quick escape." As they prepared to leave the ship, Commander Vex contacted them one more time. "Dr. Chun, if you're not back in 4 hours, we're coming in after you." "Hopefully it won't take that long," Sarah replied. She looked down at Stella, whose condition had worsened during the flight. The parasites were now visible as glowing tracks under her translucent skin, and her beautiful crystalline fur was losing its luster. "Hang on, girl," Sarah whispered. "We're going to fix this." The airlock opened, and they stepped into Station Prometheus. The air was breathable, but carried a strange metallic taste. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows on the walls, which were covered in the same shifting patterns as the station's exterior. "Which way to the Biological Research Archives?" Sarah asked. Before Kess could answer, a holographic projection materialized in front of them. It was humanoid, but clearly artificial, too perfect, too symmetrical to be natural. "Welcome to Station Prometheus," the AI said in a voice that sounded like music played through broken glass. "I'm the architect. You carry one who dreams among the stars." The AI's projection focused on Stella's pod, and suddenly, the station around them came alive. Lights blazed to full intensity, machinery hummed with power, and the shifting patterns on the walls began moving faster. "Dreamweaver," the AI continued. "It has been 2,847 years, 4 months, and 16 days since the last of your kind graced these halls. Welcome home." Sarah stared at the AI. "Home? This station was built in partnership with the Luxian Dreamweavers," the architect explained. "They try to help us find peace when our creations turned against us. They failed, but their sacrifice was not forgotten." "Can you help her?" Sarah asked directly. "She's been infected with modified parasites based on your original research." The AI's projection flickered, showing what might have been anger. "Modified? Show me." The AI extended a glowing tendril towards Stella's pod, and suddenly holographic displays filled the air around them, showing detailed scans of the parasites. "Barbarians," the AI hissed. "They have taken the Devourer virus and corrupted it. This is not science. This is abomination." "But you can stop it," Sarah pressed. "I could do better than stop it," the architect replied. "I can reverse it. But the process will be dangerous for the Dreamweaver. There's a 23.7% chance of failure." Sarah looked at Stella's deteriorating condition. Without treatment, failure was certain. "Do it," she said. "As you wish, doctor. Follow me to the healing chamber. It is time to undo the damage done by those who would corrupt the gift of life." As they followed the AI deeper into the station, Sarah couldn't help but wonder what other secret station Prometheus held. But right now, all that mattered was saving the life of a beautiful creature who had been thrown away like garbage. The healing chamber was unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. A spherical room with walls made of the same crystal as Stella's fur, filled with equipment that seemed to respond to thought rather than touch. The AI directed them to place Stella's pod in the center of the room. "Begin the purification protocol," the architect announced. The room filled with light, and Sarah watched in amazement as the station's ancient technology went to work saving the life of a Dreamweaver. The healing chamber hummed with power as ancient technology came alive around Stella's pod. Crystalline formations grew from the walls like living things, reaching toward the Dreamweaver with delicate tendrils of light. Sarah watched in fascination as the station's AI, the architect, coordinated systems that had been dormant for millennia. "The purification process will take approximately 93 minutes, the architect announced. "The parasites have integrated deeply into her neural pathways. Removing them without causing permanent damage requires precise calibration." Sarah studied the readouts appearing on crystalline displays throughout the chamber. The technology was far beyond anything she understood, but the medical data was clear enough. The parasites weren't just feeding on Stella. They were rewriting her genetic code. "These aren't just biological weapons," Sarah realized. "They're conversion agents." "Correct," the architect confirmed. "The Devourer virus was designed to transform living tissue into a controllable substrate. The Vexi modifications were intended to make the process species-specific, but they failed to understand the underlying mechanisms. Jorah growled, all four of his arms clenched into fists. They were trying to turn her into something else? A living weapon, Kes said quietly, studying the data streams. The parasites would have eventually converted her entire nervous system into a biological computer under Vex-High control. Sarah felt sick. The implications were staggering. If the Vex-High had perfected this technology, they could have enslaved entire species by infecting key individuals. How many others? She asked. How many test subjects did they use? The architect's projection flickered. Unknown. However, I have been monitoring Vex-High communication channels since your arrival. They are agitated. What do you mean? 3 Vex-High dreadnoughts are currently en route to this location. They appear to be quite upset about losing their test subject. Sarah's blood ran cold. How long until they get here? At their current speed, approximately 74 minutes. That gave them less than 20 minutes after Stella's treatment finished. Can we defend against them? The station's defensive systems remain operational, the architect replied. However, I am programmed to avoid conflict when possible. The Vex-High ships are heavily armed. Commander Vex's voice suddenly crackled through their communication devices. Dr. Chun, we have a problem. Long-range sensors are picking up Vex-High signatures inbound. Big ones. We know, Sarah replied. Can your ships handle 3 dreadnoughts? There was a pause. Maybe. Depends how badly they want your patient back. They want her very badly, Sarah said grimly. She's evidence of war crimes. Then, they'll fight to the death to prevent that evidence from reaching civilized space, Commander Vex concluded. Dr. Chun, I suggest you hurry. As if summoned by the conversation, new holographic displays materialized showing the approaching Vex-High fleet. The ships were massive, each one the size of small city, bristling with weapons and traveling at speeds that defied normal physics. Those aren't just warships, Kes observed. They're mobile research facilities. Look at the scanner configurations. The architect's projection turned toward them. The lead vessel contains biological warfare laboratories. They intend to recover the Dreamweaver and continue their experiments. Sarah looked at Stella's still form in the healing pod. Crystalline tendrils of light were weaving through her body, carefully extracting the parasites and repairing the damage they'd caused. The Dreamweaver's fur was beginning to regain its luster, but the process was clearly delicate. How much longer? Sarah asked. 67 minutes for complete recovery, the architect replied. However, the parasites could be neutralized in approximately 40 minutes, making transportation safer. Do it. 40 minutes it is. The incomplete treatment will leave her weakened for several days, but she will survive. Sarah made the calculation in her head. 40 minutes until Stella was stable enough to move, 74 minutes until the Vex-High arrived. That gave them 34 minutes to escape, assuming nothing went wrong. Architect, she said, what can you tell us about Vex-High biological research? We need evidence of what they've been doing. I have been monitoring their activities for several decades, the AI replied. They have been systematically acquiring specimens from endangered species for experimentation. The Dreamweaver is merely the latest victim. Holographic displays filled the chamber, showing documented evidence. Laboratory footage, research notes, even videos of Vex-High scientists conducting experiments on helpless creatures. Sarah felt her anger building as she watched the callous disregard for life. This is genocide, she said. They're not just testing weapons. They're deliberately targeting species close to extinction. The data suggests they intend to harvest genetic material from all known intelligent species, the architect confirmed. Their ultimate goal appears to be the creation of a universal biological weapon capable of targeting any form of life. Jorah's expression was murderous. We need to get this information to the Galactic Council. The Council won't act against the Vex-High without overwhelming evidence, Kes pointed out. They're too politically powerful. Then, we make the evidence overwhelming, Sarah decided. Architect, can you copy all the data you have on Vex-High research activities? I can provide you with complete documentation spanning 47 years of observation. However, the data storage requirements are substantial. How substantial? Approximately 847 terabytes of compressed data. Sarah winced. That was far more than their ship's storage capacity. Can you transmit it directly to the Galactic Council? Not from this location. The station's communication array was damaged in the final battle with our creations. I can, however, create a portable data core containing the most critical evidence. Do it. As the architect began preparing the data core, Sarah checked on Stella's progress. The parasites were visibly retreating from the Dreamweaver's nervous system, leaving behind trails of restored crystalline tissue. Stella's breathing was stronger, and her telepathic presence felt more stable. "Thank you." Aster's came a whisper in Sarah's mind. "Save your strength," Sarah replied aloud. "We're not out of this yet. Cubs must return to cubs." Sarah felt her heart break a little. After everything Stella had endured, her first concern was still for her children. "We'll get you home to them. I promise." Commander Vex's voice interrupted her thoughts. "Dr. Chun, the Vex High fleet just increased speed. New estimate puts them here in 58 minutes. "That's impossible," Kess said, checking the sensor readings. "Those ships can't safely travel that fast through this region." "Unless they don't care about safety," Jorik observed grimly. The architect's projection turned toward them. "The Vex High are pushing their engines beyond safe parameters. They are apparently willing to risk catastrophic failure to reach this location quickly. They're desperate," Sarah realized. "If this evidence gets out, it could destroy their entire civilization. Or they could claim we fabricated it," Kess pointed out. "Our word against theirs, and they have more political influence." "Not if we have a living witness," Sarah said, looking at Stella. "A Dreamweaver who can share her memories telepathically. They can't fake that." The implications hit everyone at the same time. Stella wasn't just a patient. She was potentially the key to exposing decades of Vex High war crimes. "No wonder they want her back so badly," Jorik muttered. "And no wonder they were willing to kill her when the experiments went wrong," Kess added. "Dead witnesses can't testify." The architect completed the data core and presented it to Sarah, a crystalline device about the size of her palm that seemed to contain swirling galaxies of information. "This contains all essential evidence of Vex High biological warfare research," the AI explained. "Guard it well. The information it contains could prevent countless atrocities." Sarah carefully tucked the device into her medical kit. "Thank you." "Dr. Chun," Commander Vex called over the comm. "We need to make a decision. My ships can buy you time, but not against 3 dreadnoughts. If you're going to run, now would be good." Sarah looked at Stella's healing pod. The treatment was working. The parasites were almost completely neutralized, but interrupting it now could still be dangerous. "How long until the treatment can be safely interrupted?" she asked the architect. 17 minutes for minimal risk. 12 minutes for acceptable risk. 7 minutes for inadvisable but survivable risk. And how long until we're completely out of options? "Based on current Vex High approach vectors and the combat capabilities of your escort vessels, I estimate 14 minutes until retreat becomes impossible." Sarah made the hardest decision of her medical career. "Start the emergency extraction protocol. We're leaving in 7 minutes." "Dr. Chun," the architect said, "I must inform you of one additional complication." "What now?" "The station's proximity sensors have detected something else. 3 ships of unknown configuration are approaching from the opposite direction. They will arrive in approximately 1 hour." Kess pulled up the sensor data and swore in her native language. "Those are Etherian signatures. Council enforcement vessels." "Someone tipped off the Council?" Jorik asked. "Or the Vex High called for backup," Sarah realized. "If Council ships find us here with Stella and the evidence, they might confiscate everything pending an investigation that could take years." "The Etherians have their own agenda," Kess confirmed. "They won't want this information getting out either. Too disruptive to galactic stability." Sarah felt the walls closing in. Vex High warships from one direction, Council enforcement from another, and a desperately ill patient who still needed time to recover. "New plan," she announced. "We take Stella and the evidence, but we don't run. We go to ground." "Where?" Jorik asked. Sarah smiled grimly. "Right here. This station has been hiding from hostile forces for 3,000 years. Time to see if it's learned any new tricks." The architect's projection brightened noticeably. "An intriguing proposal. I have not had visitors for such an extended period. Yes, I believe I can conceal your presence from both the Vex High and the Etherians." "What's the catch?" Kess asked suspiciously. "The station's concealment protocols require me to power down all non-essential systems, including life support in most sections. You will be confined to the central core for the duration." "How long?" Sarah asked. "Until both fleets depart. Potentially several days." Sarah looked at her companions. Jorik nodded immediately. Broodhans were tough enough to handle almost any hardship. Kess looked thoughtful, but eventually agreed. Commander Vex would have to make his own decisions about whether to stay and fight or retreat. All right, Architect, hide us. As the station began powering down around them, Sarah carefully moved Stella to a portable life support unit. The Dreamweaver was stable, but still unconscious, her body slowly healing from the trauma of the parasites. Dr. Chun, Commander Vex's voice came one last time before communications went dark. We're going to lead the Vex High away from the station. If you make it out of this, tell the galaxy what happened here. Thank you, Commander, for everything. It was an honor, Doctor. Vex out. The lights dimmed throughout the healing chamber as the Architect activated the station's stealth systems. Through the crystalline walls, Sarah could see the approaching Vex High fleet, their ships burning hard toward what they thought was their target. Instead, they would find only empty space and the wreckage of a battle that happened 3,000 years ago. Sarah settled down beside Stella's life support unit, the data core safe in her pocket and hope in her heart. They had the evidence they needed to stop the Vex High biological weapons program. Now, they just had to survive long enough to deliver it. Outside, the first shots of what would become known as the Battle of Prometheus lit up the void. But inside the station's core, a human doctor kept watch over a dying alien who had become the key to saving countless lives. The Vex High had thrown away what they considered broken and worthless. They were about to learn that sometimes the things you throw away come back to haunt you. The station shuddered as weapons fire erupted in the space around them. Through the crystalline walls of the central core, Sarah could see flashes of light as Commander Vex's ships engaged the Vex High dreadnoughts. The Architect had made the station effectively invisible to sensors, but the battle raging outside was very real. Status report, Sarah asked the AI while checking Stella's vital signs. Commander Vex vessels are employing hit-and-run tactics, attempting to draw the Vex High fleet away from the station. The Architect replied. The Wraiths are impressively tactical. They're using the local debris field to mask their movements. Jorek watched the light show through the station's walls. How long can 3 ships hold off 3 dreadnoughts? Under normal circumstances, perhaps 20 minutes, the Architect calculated. However, Wraith ships are designed for asymmetric warfare. They may last considerably longer. Sarah, try not to think about the brave aliens fighting and dying to protect them. Instead, she focused on Stella, who was slowly showing signs of improvement. The Dreamweaver's crystalline fur was regaining its luster, and her telepathic presence felt stronger. Where cubs, danger, asterisk, you're safe, Sarah said gently, both aloud and projecting the thought. Your cubs are safe. We're going to get you home to them. Stella's large eyes opened, focusing on Sarah with an intelligence that was almost overwhelming. In those galaxy-deep pupils, Sarah could see gratitude, fear, hope, and something else, a kind of ancient wisdom that came from being part of a species that had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations. Human, why save me? Your kind, new to stars, do not owe us, asterisk, because it's the right thing to do, Sarah replied simply. Where I come from, we don't abandon people who need help. Stella's wing-like appendages fluttered weakly. People, you see me as people. Of course. What else would you be? The Vex High called me specimen, test subject, thing. Asterisk, Sarah felt anger burn her chest. They were wrong. You're Stella. You have cubs who need their mother. And you're under my protection now. The conversation was interrupted by a massive impact that sent vibrations through the station structure. Emergency lighting flickered, and the Architect's projection wavered. Direct hit to the station's outer shell, the AI reported. It appears one of the Vex High vessels has broken off from the main engagement. Kess was studying a tactical display that had materialized in the air. They're not trying to destroy the station. They're attempting to dock. They know we're here? Jorek asked. Impossible, the Architect stated. The concealment protocols are functioning perfectly. Then, why are they docking? Sarah asked. Her question was answered a moment later when armed figures in Vex High combat suits began forcing their way through the station's outer airlocks. The Architect's sensors tracked their progress as they moved through the darkened corridors with practiced efficiency. They're following a predetermined route, the Architect observed. These individuals have been here before. Of course, Kess said grimly. They've been stealing research data for 50 years. They probably know this station better than most museums. Sarah looked at Stella, who was trying to sit up despite her weakness. How long until they reach us? At their current pace, approximately 16 minutes, the Architect calculated. Can we move Stella? not safely. Her neural pathways are still reintegrating. Physical stress could cause permanent damage. Sarah felt the weight of impossible decisions. Stay and risk capture, move and risk killing her patient or architect. You said the station's defensive systems are still operational. Correct. However, I am programmed to avoid lethal force except in cases of direct threat to the station's core systems. What counts as a direct threat? The AI's projection flickered, and for a moment Sarah could have sworn she saw something like amusement in its artificial features. That is subject to interpretation. Before Sarah could respond, Commander Vex's voice crackled through the emergency communication system. Dr. Chun, if you're receiving this, the Vex High have sent boarding parties to the station. We're trying to break off and provide support, but we're pinned down by the other two dreadnoughts. Understood, Sarah replied. Focus on your own survival. We'll handle things here. Easy to say, Jorik muttered, checking his weapon. Hard to do. Kess was already moving toward the chamber's exit. There are only 3 of us, and dozens of them. We need to think smart, not fight hard. Architect, Sarah said, an idea forming. The Vex High boarding party. Are they carrying any biological samples? Scanning, yes. Multiple containment units with various organic specimens, including parasites like the ones that infected Stella. Highly probable. The Vex High appear to be prepared for field research. Sarah smiled grimly. Then, they're carrying biological contaminants into your station. Specimens that could potentially damage your core systems if they escape containment. The architect's projection brightened considerably. An astute observation, Dr. Chun. Such contamination would indeed constitute a direct threat to station integrity. And what's the standard protocol for containing biological threats? Emergency sterilization of affected areas. The AI replied with what sounded suspiciously like satisfaction, followed by immediate quarantine procedures. The chamber's lighting shifted to a pulsing red as alarms began sounding throughout the station. The architect's voice echoed through the corridors, speaking in multiple languages, including Vex High. Warning, biological contamination detected. Initiating emergency sterilization protocols. All unauthorized personnel must evacuate immediately or face automatic sterilization procedures. Through the station's internal sensors, Sarah watched chaos erupt among the boarding party. The Vex High soldiers found themselves trapped in corridors that were rapidly filling with cleansing plasma, while automated defense turrets emerged from hidden compartments. That's remarkably effective, Jorik observed as half the boarding party was efficiently neutralized. The architects were very thorough in their security measures, the AI explained. I'm simply following established protocols. But not all of the intruders were caught off guard. A smaller group, clearly more familiar with the station's layout, had taken refuge in a shielded research laboratory and were working to bypass the station's security. They're accessing the biological archives, the architect reported with something approaching alarm. If they succeed, they could download decades of research data, including information about other species they could target, Sarah realized. Stella struggled to sit up fully, her wings spreading despite her obvious weakness. Must stop them. Cannot let more suffer. No, Sarah said firmly, gently pushing the Dreamweaver back down. You're still recovering. We'll handle this. I can help. Telepathic abilities returning. Asterisk before Sarah could protest further, Stella's eyes began to glow with an inner light. Her consciousness reached out through the station, touching the minds of the Vex High soldiers still trying to access the research archives. What happened next was unlike anything Sarah had ever witnessed. The Vex High soldiers suddenly stopped their work, their faces showing confusion and then terror. They began backing away from their equipment, weapons forgotten, as if facing some invisible horror. Showing them what they have done, the pain of every test subject, every creature that died for their experiments. Asterisk through her connection with Stella, Sarah felt echoes of what the Dreamweaver was projecting, decades of suffering, fear, and death experienced by countless innocent beings. It was overwhelming, devastating, and absolutely true. The Vex High soldiers fled the research laboratory, stumbling through corridors in their desperation to escape the psychic onslaught. Within minutes, the entire boarding party had retreated to their ship, which immediately undocked and pulled away from the station. Remarkable, the architect observed. I have never seen Vex High forces retreat so quickly. Stella's glow faded as she collapsed back onto her medical bed, exhausted but triumphant. They will not soon forget. The faces of their victims will haunt their dreams. You shouldn't have done that, Sarah said, checking her patient's vital signs. You're still too weak. Hatip could not let them take information to hurt others. Astra's Commander Vex's voice came through the communications again. Dr. Chun, something spooked the Vex High. Their boarding party just retreated, and now all 3 dreadnoughts are pulling back. What did you do over there? Stella reminded them that their victims have faces, Sarah replied. Dreamweaver justice. That would definitely do it. The tactical situation was improving, but they weren't safe yet. The Etherian Council ships were still approaching, and they would be much harder to fool or frighten away. Time until the Council ships arrive? Sarah asked. 37 minutes, the architect replied. However, I am detecting additional vessels approaching. Multiple vectors, various ship configurations. Kes pulled up the sensor readings, and her expression grew puzzled. Those aren't military ships. They look like civilian vessels. Cargo haulers, passenger liners, even some private yachts. Who would be crazy enough to come to the Void Sector in civilian ships? Jork wondered. Sarah felt Stella's consciousness brush against her mind, sharing images and understanding. Oh my stars. Stella, did you? Called to them when touching Vex-High minds accidentally broadcast on telepathic frequencies. Others heard, others. Every psychic species within 50 light years felt the pain, felt the truth. They're coming. The sensor readings were staggering. Ships from dozens of species were converging on Station Prometheus. Not warships, but civilian vessels filled with ordinary citizens who had felt Stella's psychic broadcast and understood what it meant. There must be hundreds of ships out there, Kes said in amazement. 347 vessels confirmed, the architect reported. Representatives from 18 different species. Many appear to be carrying media equipment. Sarah began to understand what was happening. They're witnesses. Stella's broadcast didn't just reach other telepaths. It reached journalists, activists, ordinary people who care about justice. The first ships were already arriving, taking positions around the station. News vessels from major galactic networks, humanitarian ships from various organizations, even what looked like a passenger liner full of Kytherian peace activists. Dr. Chun, came a new voice over the communications array, speaking heavily accented standard. This is Captain Thorne of the independent news vessel Truth Seeker. We received a telepathic distress signal indicating massive violations of galactic preservation laws. Can you confirm? Sarah looked at the data core containing evidence of Vex-High war crimes, then at Stella, who was managing a weak smile despite her exhaustion. This is Dr. Sarah Chun, she replied. I have in my possession documented evidence of systematic biological warfare research conducted by the Vex-High against protected species. I also have a living witness, a Luxian Dreamweaver who was tortured and experimented upon. The response was immediate. Dozens of ships requested permission to dock, reporters demanding interviews, humanitarian organizations offering medical assistance and legal protection. The Etherian ships are changing course, the architect announced. They appear to be leaving. Cowards, Jork growled with satisfaction. They don't want to face this many witnesses. Within an hour, Station Prometheus had gone from being a forgotten relic to the center of the biggest news story in the galaxy. Sarah found herself giving interviews to reporters from species she'd never heard of, while Stella rested under the protection of a dozen different advocacy groups. Dr. Chun, one reporter asked, what made you risk everything to save a single alien creature? Sarah thought about the question, looking at Stella, who was finally sleeping peacefully, surrounded by the love and support of beings from across the galaxy. Because that's what humans do, she said simply. We don't abandon people who need help, no matter where they come from or what they look like. The reporter's next question was interrupted by Commander Vex's ships returning from their battle with the Vex-High fleet. Dr. Chun, the Wraith Commander's voice came over the comm. I have some news that might interest you. The Vex-High dreadnoughts just received new orders. They've been recalled to their home system for emergency consultation with their High Council. Sarah smiled. I imagine they have a lot of explaining to do. Indeed. And Doctor? My grandmother would have been proud to know that her life debt to the Dreamweavers has finally been repaid. As Sarah prepared for the long journey ahead, testifying before the Galactic Council, ensuring Stella received proper medical care, and helping to reunite the Dreamweaver with her cubs, she reflected on how much had changed in just a few days. The Vexi had thrown Stella away like garbage, expecting her to die, forgotten and unmourned. Instead, her rescue had sparked a galactic movement for justice that would reshape interspecies relations for generations to come. Sometimes, Sarah thought, the most important battles are fought not with weapons, but with compassion. 6 months after the Battle of Prometheus, Dr. Sarah Chun stood before the Galactic Council in what was being called the most significant war crimes trial in interstellar history. The Great Chamber of the Council Station buzzed with representatives from over 200 species, all gathered to hear testimony about the Vexi biological weapons program. Sarah adjusted her formal medical uniform and looked across the chamber at the Vexi delegation. Their High Counselor, an ancient being named Zekthar, sat rigid in his seat, his pale features showing no emotion. Behind him sat rows of Vexi scientists and military officials, all facing charges of crimes against sapient life. Dr. Chun announced the Etherian Chief Arbiter, "You may present your evidence." Sarah activated the holographic display system, and the chamber filled with images from the architect's data core. Laboratory footage showing Vexi scientists experimenting on helpless creatures, research notes detailing the development of species-specific biological weapons, and detailed records of test subjects who had died in agony. For 47 years, Sarah began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics, the Vexi conducted illegal biological warfare research using protected and endangered species as test subjects. This program resulted in the torture and death of over 3,000 sapient beings. Murmurs of horror rippled through the assembled delegates as the evidence played out before them. Sarah had seen these images dozens of times during the investigation, but they still made her sick. The Vexi will claim this research was conducted for defensive purposes, Sarah continued. But the evidence clearly shows their intent to develop offensive biological weapons capable of targeting specific species for genocide. High Counselor Zekthar rose from his seat. Honorable Arbiters, these allegations are based on fabricated evidence provided by a rogue human and an AI of questionable reliability. The Vexi hegemony has always acted within. He was interrupted by a soft chiming sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The chamber's lights dimmed slightly, and a gentle presence touched the minds of everyone present. Stella walked into the chamber. The Dreamweaver had made a remarkable recovery in the months since her rescue. Her crystalline fur gleamed with health. Her 6 legs carried her with fluid grace, and her gossamer wings caught the light like captured starlight. She wore no restraints, no technological devices. She came as herself in all her alien beauty. Behind her walked 3 smaller versions of herself, her cubs, finally, reunited with their mother after months of separation. The young Dreamweavers stayed close to Stella's side, their large eyes taking in the enormous gathering with curiosity rather than fear. "I am Stella of the Singing Crystals," her voice whispered into every mind in the chamber. "I speak for those who can no longer speak for themselves." The Vexi delegation shifted uncomfortably. Several of their scientists were staring at Stella with expressions of recognition and fear. "You know me," Stella projected to the Vexi. "You remember the pain you caused. Let me share that memory with all present." What happened next would be remembered as the most powerful moment in the history of galactic justice. Stella's consciousness expanded to touch every mind in the chamber, not to control or harm, but simply to share the truth. Every delegate, every reporter, every observer experienced a fraction of what the test subjects had endured. They felt the cold laboratory tables, the restraints that held struggling bodies still, the agony of parasites eating away at nervous systems. They experienced the despair of creatures who knew they would never see their families again, the terror of beings who were slowly being converted into living weapons. And they felt something else, the faces of the Vexi scientists who had conducted these experiments, methodically documenting suffering as if it were simply another data point. The chamber was silent for long minutes after Stella's sharing ended. Many delegates were openly weeping. Others sat in stunned silence, trying to process what they had experienced. High Counselor Zekthar remained standing, but his composure was cracking. This is manipulation of evidence through telepathic coercion. It proves nothing. It proves everything, Stella replied gently. Truth needs no manipulation. It stands on its own. Chief Arbiter Velterra, an elderly Etherian whose species prided themselves on impartiality, spoke in a voice heavy with emotion. High Counselor Zekthar, how do you respond to these revelations? Zekthar began, then stopped. For the first time in the proceedings, he looked directly at Stella. Sarah could see something breaking in his expression, the careful facade of righteous indignation crumbling under the weight of truth. We did what was necessary for the security of the hegemony, he said finally. These creatures were going to die anyway. Their species are endangered, nearly extinct. We simply made use of them before they perished naturally. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. Sarah felt her own anger surge, but Stella's presence in her mind kept her calm. He believes his own words. Asterisk the Dreamweaver observed sadly. He has told himself this lie so many times that he thinks it is truth. Sarah stepped forward. High Counselor, you speak of creatures going extinct naturally. But the evidence shows that many of the species you experimented on were driven to the brink of extinction by your own activities. You weren't using specimens that were already dying. You were creating the conditions that made them endangered in the first place. The Data Core's files painted a damning picture. The Vexi had systematically hunted rare species to near extinction, then captured the survivors for experimentation. It was a cycle of horror that had been going on for decades. Furthermore, Sarah continued, you fundamentally misunderstood what you were doing. These weren't creatures or specimens. They were people, parents, children, artists, philosophers, beings with hopes and dreams and families who loved them. Stella's cubs moved closer to their mother, their young voices joining the telepathic conversation. Our mother sings the star songs, they shared. Asterisk, she teaches us the old stories, shows us how to weave dreams into light. The cold people took her from us and hurt her because they cannot understand that different does not mean lesser. Asterisk, the innocence in their mental voices was heartbreaking. Sarah watched as even some of the Vexi delegates looked away, unable to meet the gaze of the cubs whose mother they had tortured. Chief Arbiter Velterra consulted with the other senior arbiters for several minutes before returning to address the chamber. The evidence presented is overwhelming and undeniable, she announced. The Galactic Council finds the Vexi hegemony guilty of systematic crimes against sapient life, violations of the galactic preservation laws, and the development of prohibited biological weapons. The chamber erupted in voices, some cheering, others shouting in outrage, many simply expressing relief that justice was finally being served. The punishments will be severe, Velterra continued. The Vexi biological weapons program will be completely dismantled under Council supervision. All research data will be destroyed. The hegemony will pay reparations to the surviving victims and the families of those who died. And, most importantly, they will establish a foundation dedicated to the protection and preservation of endangered species, overseen by a board that includes representatives from every species they harmed. High Counselor Zekthar sat down heavily, his political career and his people's reputation in ruins. But Sarah found she couldn't quite feel satisfaction at his defeat. The damage had been done. Thousands were dead. Entire species had been pushed to the brink of extinction, and the trust between civilizations would take generations to rebuild. Justice is not about punishment, Asterisk, Stella observed, sensing Sarah's thoughts. Asterisk, it is about healing, about making sure such pain never happens again. Asterisk, after the formal proceedings ended, Sarah found herself in a quiet garden area of the council station, watching Stella's cubs play among the alien flowers. The young Dreamweavers were laughing, a sound like wind chimes made of crystal, as they chased each other through the air on their gossamer wings. They're beautiful, said a voice behind her. Sarah turned to find Commander Vex approaching, looking somewhat uncomfortable in formal diplomatic robes rather than his usual military uniform. How are you adjusting to peace negotiations? Sarah asked with a smile. Terribly, he admitted. Much preferred it when I could just shoot problems instead of talking about them. But my grandmother always said that some battles are too important to win with weapons alone. They watched the cubs play for a while in comfortable silence. Finally, Commander Vex spoke again. Dr. Chun, my people have a tradition. When a life debt is repaid, we mark the occasion with a celebration. Would you and Stella honor us by attending such a celebration on our homeworld? Sarah was touched. Of course, though I think Stella deserves most of the credit for what happened here. Perhaps, but it was a human who risked everything to save a life that others had thrown away. That matters to my people. As if summoned by their conversation, Stella approached with her cubs clustering around her legs. The Dreamweaver had grown stronger over the months, but there was something different about her now. A gravity, a weightiness that came from having survived something terrible and chosen to use that survival to help others. The trial is over, asterisk, she observed. But the real work is just beginning. What do you mean? Sarah asked. There are others. Other species being hunted, other laboratories hidden in dark corners of the galaxy. The Vexi were not the only ones conducting such research. Sarah felt her heart sink. How many others? Unknown. But the galaxy heard my call during the trial. They felt the pain of the victims. Many will come forward now, sharing their own stories, their own evidence. Asterisk, it was true. In the days following the trial, reports were flooding in from across the galaxy. Other species coming forward with evidence of illegal experimentation, other victims sharing their stories, other researchers blowing the whistle on programs they could no longer stomach. So what do we do? Sarah asked. Stella's expression showed something that might have been a smile. Asterisk, we do what you taught me, Dr. Chun. We don't abandon people who need help. Asterisk Commander Vex nodded approvingly. My ships are at your disposal, Doctor. The Wraith clans have voted unanimously to support any efforts to root out these illegal programs. Sarah looked at her unlikely allies, a telepathic alien who had survived torture, a predator warrior who believed in honor, and 3 young Dreamweavers who represented hope for the future. All right then, she said. I guess we're starting a rescue organization. Over the following months, what became known as the Prometheus Initiative grew from a small group of idealists into a galaxy-spanning network dedicated to protecting endangered species and investigating illegal research. Sarah found herself at the center of it all, using her medical skills to heal the rescued, while Stella used her telepathic abilities to gather intelligence and provide therapy for traumatized survivors. The work was dangerous and often heartbreaking. They uncovered laboratories on remote asteroids, rescued prisoners from mobile research vessels, and exposed corruption that reached into the highest levels of several galactic governments. But they also saved lives, hundreds, then thousands of beings who would otherwise have died alone and forgotten. A year after the trial, Sarah stood once again on Station Prometheus, which had been converted into a memorial and research facility. The architect had been fully reactivated and now served as a coordinator for rescue operations across the galaxy. Dr. Chun, the AI, said as Sarah reviewed the latest rescue reports, I have been analyzing the data from our operations. We have identified 2,847 survivors of illegal experimentation, shut down 23 hidden laboratories, and prevented the extinction of 7 species. The statistical impact is significant. What about the cost? Sarah asked. They had lost good people in their operations, researchers who had died trying to expose the truth, rescue teams who had been killed defending the innocent. 17 personnel confirmed lost, 43 wounded in action, significant financial expenditures, the architect replied. However, I believe the human phrase is worth every penny. Sarah smiled. The AI had been spending time learning human idioms from the rescued victims, many of whom stayed on the station to help with operations. Status report on our latest rescue, she asked. The Korthak research facility has been completely shut down. All 47 test subjects have been successfully extracted and are receiving medical treatment. The facility's lead scientist has agreed to testify before the council in exchange for leniency. It was good news, but Sarah knew there would always be another facility, another group of victims who needed help. The work would never truly end. That is not a cause for despair. Stella's voice whispered in her mind as the Dreamweaver entered the command center. It is a cause for hope. How do you figure that? Because it means there will always be opportunities to make the galaxy a little bit better, to save one more life, to prevent one more atrocity, to show one more being that they are not forgotten. Stella's cubs, now grown into young adults, were working as translators and counselors for newly rescued victims. They had inherited their mother's empathic abilities, but none of her traumatic memories, making them perfect for helping others heal. You know, Sarah mused, when I first found you in that garbage container, I thought I was just trying to save one life. You were, Stella replied. Mine. Everything else grew from that single act of compassion. Sarah looked around the bustling command center. aliens from dozens of species working together, former enemies collaborating to protect the innocent, victims who had become advocates for others still suffering. It had all started with a human doctor who refused to abandon a dying alien, and a creature who had been thrown away like garbage but refused to give up hope. "What's our next mission?" Sarah asked. Stella's eyes brightened with that familiar, galaxy-deep intelligence. There are reports of illegal experiments in the spiral arm colonies. 3 species, recently contacted, being held against their will. How many ships do we have available? 17 vessels, standing by, Commander Vex reported from the tactical station. My cousin's clan has volunteered to provide escort duties. Sarah nodded and began pulling up the mission files. Another day, another chance to prove that no life was worthless, no being disposable, no cry for help unanswered. The Vexi had thought they could throw away the inconvenient and the broken, but they had learned, along with the rest of the galaxy, that humans had a saying that wasn't just words, it was a promise. We don't leave anyone behind. Even if the entire universe tries to throw them away, there will always be someone willing to fight to bring them home.